Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Fix Your BS, which we talk about belief systems of 5 major pillars of life: relationships, business/career, finances/money, health, and faith or beliefs, faith/beliefs. Today, we have an amazing guest. We have Skylar Lewis, who is a visionary entrepreneur, author, speaker, and family man. He is the founder and CEO of Rise Up Kings, which is a company dedicated to empowering men and women to reach their full potential in all aspects of their lives. He has authored multiple books, including The 2-Day CEO and the Ruck 90-Day Journal. His passion is helping others fulfill the God-given purpose without sacrificing their faith, family, or fitness. I think you can see why I asked him to be on the podcast, because he matches so much of what we do. He's very aligned. So without further ado, Skylar, thank you for being on today. Really appreciate you showing up and talking about what you do, why you do it, who you do it for, and how you can benefit others.
Love it. Love it. Thanks for having me on, Greg.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about, when you say visionary entrepreneur, I love that. It's something that I talk about a lot with my students and coaching groups, is vision, creating a vision. So when you say visionary entrepreneur, man, elaborate on that. What what is that about to you?
Well, yeah. So I work primarily also with entrepreneurs, and vision's such a key component. There's a Bible verse where there is no vision, the people perish. And so having a clear vision, not only for yourself will cause you to have something to wake up for every day, right? And so I have a clear vision of where I'm going, and it's inspiring. And then also getting the team members on board with that vision. So I think entrepreneurs, it's critical that they have a vision. There are many entrepreneurs that do not have a clear vision of where they're going. They have an idea of where they want to go, but it's not clarified. It's not written out. It's not documented. It's not easily communicated either. And so, yeah, I think it's important for entrepreneurs to have vision, but just as much as vision, it's also important that they know how to execute.
With the book, The Secret, that was a big movement, obviously. And I think a lot of people got the wrong idea where they think they can just think about something and manifest it in their life, which would be creating a vision and just kind of hoping and thinking about it all the time. How much of a role does action play into after you create that vision and action?
Yeah, I believe intention, right? There's intention and there's mechanism. So, right. So for me, I believe you can have a very high level of intention. It requires both, but you can have a majority of intention and the mechanism will show up. So the mechanism will show up once you get clear on what you want to achieve. It's what we teach at some of our seminars, right? When you get that level of clarity and commitment, how you're going to get there shows up. And so once you get clarity on the how, it requires a high level of action and execution. And I think for me, like what we've done well in our businesses is we've executed very well. An example of execution is when most people read books or listen to a podcast, they get excited about new ideas, but they rarely ever execute. I was having a conversation with my dad a while ago, and he was reading this pretty incredible book. And I said, "Hey, what'd you learn?" And so he named all these things that he learned. I said, "Awesome. So what's the plan? What are you going to do with it?" And he's like, "What do you mean?" I said, what are you going to do with it? He said, "Nothing specific. It was just good information." And so that was just, it shows where a lot of people are. They'll take in good information, but they won't go execute. So it's my goal with every book or everything I learn, I actually take some level of action on it to move it forward, and then consistent action. So some people might jump in and take some action, but it's really the consistent executing of goals and plans that make people successful. And most people do not have that level of discipline to stick with their long-term execution because there's going to be pain and difficulties along the way. And that's usually when they bail out.
Yeah, man, that is so true. Like that statement right there is so true. In the speaking engagements I do, there's a certain group of people that tend to show up to those speaking engagements repeatedly. And yeah, I'll give different information, but their life never changes. I ask them, well, how's your life changed from that? Like I can't change your life in a 90-minute talk. You have to take that 90-minute talk and take the information and implement it in your life. And like you just said, there's that transition where they're trying to transition into this new individual, and that's uncomfortable. And a lot of people go back to the comfort. So any tips or tricks when you're talking about somebody going through that transition and that pain that keeps them going? Because as you know, motivation is a short-term thing. How do you develop that discipline and consistency to end up at that end result that you're looking for?
I think one aspect of that is the relationship with pain. So what is your relationship with pain? And so I have a shirt, it says, pain is the path. Comfort is the enemy. So for most people, I think they're striving for comfort, trying to find a way to get to retirement early so they can go on vacation the rest of their life, right? They're searching for comfort, but nothing great ever happened with comfort. Like, I'm not living my best life when I'm most comfortable on the couch watching TV. I never feel inspired. I'm never on top of the world. So is comfort really the goal? And so if comfort's not the goal and is not the path, then what is the path? And so I would challenge people like pain and their relationship with pain. Because if they're not willing to go through the pain, they'll never build anything great. And so if you have a relationship with pain where you're afraid of it, you avoid it at all costs, you won't lean into the pain. But the lessons that come from pain and the growth that comes from pain is incredible. That's where my biggest growth has come from, is when I've had a painful moment, a searingly painful moment. And so I think people improving their relationship with pain is a real critical aspect, and it'll prevent them from quitting when it gets painful. Because any worthy goal is always going to have some valleys inside of it. And as an example, I'm working on cutting out sugar, and man, it is painful. It's hard. It requires a lot of discipline to not eat sweets for me personally. And so like that's my nemesis, is sugar. That's my kryptonite. And so I have a goal until October to only have dessert or a sweet one time a week. And last week I jacked up. I totally missed the mark. And my tendency right in that valley is to beat myself up, have shame, right? There's a tendency there. And so I decided, no shame, no guilt, nothing. I missed it. Okay, now I'm going to recommit. I felt the pain. I'm going to experience the pain. All right. And I'm going to have that pain now motivate me to get to the next level. And so this week recommitted, and I'm going to follow through this week. And so I think having a different experience with pain. Like, pain's not the enemy, you guys. It's not the enemy.
I love the fact that you gave yourself grace. I talk about that a lot. You gave yourself grace. You know, you will never be perfect in any endeavor ever. So why expect perfection? When a valley happens or you mess up in your quest, in your goal, even if it's a simple one, why give up? Why put yourself down and put yourself in that state and be so hard on yourself? You know, well, what can I learn from this, instead of, I'm such an idiot and I always do this and I never this and I can't ever finish stuff. And I love that you said that. That's awesome. That's a really great lesson for a lot of people. It's easy to say, it's hard to actually do in the moment. So well done to you for noticing it and actually going, I messed up, but I'm uncomfortable that I messed up. I'm not happy with myself about it, but how can I use that and that emotional content in order to actually go do better the next time? Because that's the way it should be. I mean, how do you use your emotions, or how do you view your emotions? Do you pay attention to them, use them, and try to replicate the ones you like, or what is your strategy there?
Yeah, so we all have an emotional home, some place where we live emotionally. So some people live in anger. Like, the way you can find out your emotional home is by getting clarity around what emotion do you go to most throughout the day. Is it joy? Is it gratitude? Or is it fear? Is it anxiety? Is it stress? Is it anger? Like, what emotion do you tend to feel most? You might not feel it the whole day, but what do you feel the most? And then checking in with that, because that emotional home drives most people's their entire lives. It drives them unconsciously. And so I think emotions can be very powerful. Overly emotional people will really struggle in life. I was having a conversation with a guy at one of our events. He was just very emotional, and it was causing him to really not be effective. And then stoicism, right? The lack of emotion can also be ineffective. So I think there's a good balance between having access to emotions. And so I see him as less of a good or bad thing, they're more of an indicator of what's going on inside me. So I'll check in. So if I'm feeling insecure, then I journal. So anytime I have an emotion that maybe won't serve me, insecurity, anger, fear, resentment, whatever's going on, I'll journal on it. My journaling always starts out with, what am I feeling? So like, because I want to move through the emotion if it's not serving me. Some people live in those emotions. So I'll journal, hey, what am I feeling? And then I'll go through a process by Byron Katie. She wrote a really amazing book called Loving What Is, an incredible book. And it's the process of learning to love and embrace your life the way it currently is. And there's an exercise, we call it the Ruck reframe for Rise Up Kings reframe, but she calls it the, I forgot what she calls it, but you go through a journaling exercises, which helps to reframe what's going on, and you feel a different emotion after journaling. And so then, like, I don't want to, like, most people are they're in a funk. Like, they regularly go into deep funks and they don't pull themselves out. Like, I'm going to produce more results than most people because I pull out of my funk way quicker than most human beings, because I'm aware I got in the funk, but I also have tools. So I do not want to live in a funk. I don't want to be in a drift. I want to be high performing. And so, and we all get triggered though. Like, we all get triggered, and then we have that negative emotion that might not serve us, but people stay in the emotion the whole day, and they stay angry the next day and the next day. And while I'm out moving on and producing, their production's dropped by 50% because they're in their head and their emotions have taken over them. And so we gotta move through those emotions, and then so we move on from the emotions that don't serve us, and we accentuate the emotions that do serve us. My favorite emotions are joy and gratitude. So I do regular daily gratitude journaling, and to feel the emotion of gratitude.
Yeah, that's awesome though. And if you ask, this is what's interesting. If you ask anybody, if you were sitting in your chair right now and you can choose an emotion that you'd like to have, what would that look like? And like you just said, joy and gratitude. And most people would choose something like happiness, contentment, fulfillment, love, enlightenment, whatever words they're using, but that's what they would choose. But then why do you spend most of your day or your days in the emotion of anger, fear, frustration, resentment, pain, all these negative emotions? And they go, well, that happens to me. And I'm like, that happens to me. So that's actually the problem is they believe it happens to them. So how do you help someone in your events and everything that really says that life happens to me, or these emotions happen to me? How do you help them go from they happen to me to they happen for me? Is there a process that you use?
Yep. We do a whole session on that. And it's really identifying and becoming aware there's two primary modes of operating and mindsets people come from. One is a place of victim versus responsible. Those are the only two places you can come from. So in every circumstance, you're either the victim, it happened to you, or you're responsible. There's some level of responsibility. So how do you move out of being a victim, right? How do you become free of, like, let's say you're driving down the road, you get off on the freeway, you stop at the light, and someone smashes into you and rear ends you. So do you have any responsibility in that interaction?
If you're asking me, I'm going to say yes. Because I left at a certain time. I stopped at the stoplight. I was driving a certain amount of speed, if you ask me. But majority of people, the people that are not producing at a high level generally will say, well, no, I didn't have any responsibility, and that it was their fault. They hit me.
We're trained that way. It's the way the law works. Like, we're literally trained to be the victim in situations. So great answer, actually. So most people do not get that. So they say, and so there's a difference between responsibility and fault, right? So you can have some level of responsibility, but not be at fault. Fault is when you completely own it, when you're the one completely at fault. Right. You can have response. So you had some level of responsibility in that. Yeah. You could have rode a bicycle to work that day. You could have took the bus. Like, you got off on that exit. So of course you have some level to play. And so that's very freeing, because when you realize, okay, so you're saying most things in my life, I have some level of responsibility. And what's funny is most successful people will never, ever admit to being a victim. But once they guess what emotions come from being a victim?
Let's see. Being a victim, you're going to feel helplessness,
Mm-hmm.
Which is going to lead to hopelessness. Being a victim, you feel insecure. You feel out of control. Yeah, I mean, those are really the things.
Anger. So many times, if someone did something to you, you're going to feel angry. You're going to feel resentful. You're going to feel frustrated. So pretty much almost every quote unquote negative emotion, almost all of them stem from something happening to you. And so it's really interesting. So those are great check engine lights. So anytime you feel angry, like, who are you? Like, are you frustrated? Well, something probably happened to you that caused that frustration. It was very powerful. So once you can identify, like, oh, wow. So you're saying, if I am feeling that emotion, most likely it's tied to something happening to me, then yes, you've chosen victim. And the only way out of being a victim is to find some level of responsibility that you have. It's the only way out. There's no other option. And so so as an example, your wife leaves you, right? So she may have cheated and you may have been a great husband, but you're going to be a victim until you finally say, you know what, maybe I had something to do with that. I chose to marry her, right? Could you have done anything different in marriage? 100%. Everybody can do something different in a relationship. So you have, therefore, some level of responsibility. And when you can start to step into that and say, you know what, okay, maybe I played a role in this, it frees you. You can feel the stress leave your body when you can check in and say, hey, I'm not a victim. I'm actually responsible. I have some level of responsibility in this whole thing. And then, therefore, you're no longer a victim to life anymore. So society right now is in a major victimhood craze. I mean, that's where our culture's at. Everything, you got to punish the people that have hurt you. It's victim all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
So
feeling triggered, feeling all that stuff. You know, and what's interesting, like you just said, though, is that emotions are something that happen for you. They actually come up to show you. You can use them. Something's happening. Like positive emotions are the same way. That's what I tell people as well is, look, if you feel overjoyed, there's a reason why you feel that way. Something is occurring. And if you want to recreate that, you need to identify what that thing is so you can go, oh, I feel overjoyed or happy or content or whatever it is because of these circumstances, events, thought processes, belief systems, all those things. So you can start to identify them and go, oh, I'm going to try to recreate as much of that in my life as possible. However, that's a responsibility thing as well. So when you're feeling negative, all of a sudden, now I'm going to be a victim. No. You got to be responsible for that also. Emotions are there to be used, obviously.
Mm-hmm. And responsibility.
And I love what you're saying.
Out of it. Yep.
Right. Exactly. And you're right. I think in America especially, I mean, it just feels like the overwhelming majority of the country is moving into that. They're being taught that victimhood. It's not my fault. It wasn't me. It's someone else. And owning a couple companies and hiring employees and going through the interview processes, I've just noticed it seems like a higher percentage of people really don't want to take that responsibility, which is sad. It's got to change because it can't go like that forever. That's for sure.
Yeah. On that note, if you got fired, right, I'm thinking about this right now, right? If you got fired, you have some level of responsibility to play in that 100% of the time. 100% of the time you had some role to play in it. And so if you can find that and you can get clarity on that, like there's so much power there because then you can figure out what to shift. But as long as you're a victim, you can't learn anything because somebody else did that, right? But if you have responsibility, then you can learn a new lesson.
Well, and who's to say it's a bad thing? Who's to say it's a bad thing? You're the one that puts the label on it. If you got fired, you say, well, that's terrible. Well, why is it terrible? It could be good. You don't know. When we're talking about scripture, you're talking about, God is what I call it, but other people call it all sorts of stuff. But, when you're talking about those things, closes one door, opens another, right? If you have that faith and belief that if you keep your vision clear of what you're looking for, then have zero expectation of how that vision's going to come about, and you go with the flow, which is faith and belief. That's what I really teach people, is to understand that because something happens doesn't mean it's positive or negative. You make it positive or negative. So what if you got fired and you go, well, that's interesting. That could be a blessing. How is that a blessing? What's good about that? How is the, and you walk out. Well, you'd walk out in a totally different state as opposed to, a lot of people freaking out and throwing a fit. I always say, look, it's just fear. If you had a change that you feel you are not responsible for, now you're afraid because you have so much uncertainty, and then you're going to react in that fear state. So how can you, as a person, or teach someone else to do this, how can you take control of that and notice it so you can harness that information, that energy, and go, you know what? I'm going to flip this on its head, and we're going to take control of that responsibility of my own emotions and move forward in a different state of mind.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand where our emotions come from. So our emotions come from this is kind of the flow, right? So you have your belief systems, which drive everything, right? Which is what your podcast is. You have your belief systems, which then drive your emotions, the things that you feel, right? And then from that emotion, typically behavior then flows. And from that behavior, your life results happen. And so getting clear, like, okay, I have these belief systems that are driving my life results. All my life results are driven by the way I think about things. And so those emotions, you can reverse engineer and pull back up. Like, what was the belief that created that emotion, right? So what's an example? So with the sugar deal, right? I journaled this morning, and because I was feeling unmotivated and upset that this happened last week. It pissed me off, honestly, that I didn't have the discipline that I was looking for to execute on this goal. And so I had to journal. I'm like, hey, what is going on, and what was the belief that I had that created that emotion? And the belief system that created that emotion, the belief that I had was that I'm not that if I can't get this sweet thing right, it's going to flow into every other area of my life and mess up the other areas if I can't handle this freaking sweet sweet deal, this addiction to sugar, you can call it. And so I had a belief system that was causing me to then become disturbed by eating an extra dessert. Could mess up my whole week. Right. And so the belief system didn't serve me. So I had to reverse engineer, go back and say, and then if you want to do deeper work, you can go back and say, hey, where'd that come from? Did it come from my childhood? These belief systems that if I can't get something right, I'm a loser, or I'm like, all of our, about 80+% of our belief systems come from the age of 8 to 12 years old.
Yeah.
And so what happens is those belief systems are ingrained and programmed. So it's what our mom said about us. It's what our dad said. It's what we saw in their marriage. It's what we saw with if our teacher said, hey, you're not very good with numbers, then now you have this belief system that's locked in, I'm not good with numbers, for the rest of your life. And so we have a bunch of human beings that are really an average internally of 10 years old that have these belief systems as a kid, and it's running their entire lives, and they never go back and reprogram their belief systems and the way they operate. And so that's really, really critical to go back. And we talk about software, right, on phones and computers. We upgrade maybe once a year, every couple of years. When was the last time somebody went and upgraded their belief systems that they grew up with?
Yeah, dude, that is such a great insight. And I especially love the fact that you use the term belief systems like 15 times, because that's what this is all about, right?
Yeah.
But it is true. Yeah, we teach all the time that belief systems turn into thoughts. Your thoughts turn into your emotional reactions. Your emotional reactions turn into your habits. And there you have your life. And so if you don't like where you're at in any of those 5 pillars, then you have to look at that, take responsibility, and say, okay, well, what are the things that my actions, my emotions, my thought processes, and my beliefs, what are those things? What are they doing, or how are they acting in order to create the life that I have? Mm-hmm. And so I love having people like you on here, because we're so aligned with in the principles of this, like the principles that will never change. That's why I love teaching it, is because this is not a gimmicky new trick. This is the way life works. And if you want to take responsibility for your life, if you want to take control and have the life you want to have, I always say it's really simple. You just get new information, which will create new beliefs, and the new beliefs will create new habits, and your new habits create your new life. The problem is it's not easy. And it's not easy because people don't want to change their life of who they are because they're comfortable. Even though they may not like certain aspects, at least they can predict what they don't like. At least they're certain about it. And if they're certain about it, then they're like, well, it could be worse over there. And I'm like, yeah, but it could be better over there. It could be in a better place. You could be a better place financially, faith, or belief, your relationships, your career, your finances, your health, any of it. It could all be a little bit better. And it doesn't take much, really. So if you had to say to somebody, like somebody comes to you and they're like, man, I just don't like where I'm at. Is there a process that you would first say, okay, well, what would be the first step? Man, I don't like where I'm at right now in life in general. Is there something you tell them, man, this is what you should do? This is the first step I would take.
Yeah, well, I'm a little bit biased, right? Because we run our events. So if somebody comes and says, hey, right, I want to be a better father, or hey, I want to break free from porn, or I want to shift the way I operate in business to build wealth, then I would refer them to my Rise of Kings event, because there's a couple different ways, and there's tons of ways. So there's a couple different ways you can change. One is coaching, and I know you do group coaching, fantastic way. So coaching, individual coaching is a very powerful way to start to become aware of the belief systems that don't serve us anymore, which are driving all of our results. And so then books are a great way. And then you have seminars, like more teaching conferences. And then you have experiential events. That's one arena I play in, right? Like having an impactful experience that can shift the way you think about things, not from a logical perspective, but at an emotional core level, where it can completely shift the way you think about things through an experience. And so if someone's looking to shift though and break free, there's a whole process to that. That's a loaded question. There's a lot of work to do to shift a belief system. And one of the ways, again, you could do it through any of those ways. It could be through somebody guiding you through a process, like you do, right? And you speak and you teach and you help develop people through this process of redeveloping their belief system. The number one is awareness, becoming aware that they don't have that they have a belief system that's no longer serving them. Because the thing is that belief system served that person to a point. They got them to where they were now. So not all belief systems are bad. So some people have a belief system around not trusting people. People can't be trusted. So if you have a belief, and the thing with belief systems is they always prove themselves right. That's what they do. That's the purpose of a belief. It's always going to prove itself right. And so if you don't trust people, you're going to continuously find people that are breaking your trust. So that's a real important one to fix because it was installed somewhere. Maybe it was your buddy when you were 12 years old that screwed you over and told you, or maybe it was your dad that was supposed to be there that left, right? Somewhere that belief system of not trusting people can't be trusted was installed. And it worked really well as a kid because it protects you from a lot of damaging circumstances. Like it was necessary. But at a certain point, it no longer becomes necessary. And as an adult, it's not a very effective belief system because it's going to prevent intimacy with people. And so the first step is getting awareness. Okay, cool. Yeah, crap. That's not an effective belief system. And then to have a strong enough why it's time to change it. And then once you decide to change it, I look at belief systems as like a table. So you have a table and a belief system has, call it 5 legs. And the more evidence you have around that belief system, the stronger the table is. So if you've been burned by 100 people over your life, you got 100 legs now that this thing is ridiculously strong. And good luck changing that belief system. Because if you have 30 years of evidence that people can't be trusted, you just can't shift that very easy. So what you have to do is you have to start to break up that belief system. So you start to chop the legs down. And the way you do that is you first have a perspective shift, like an opening. Maybe people can be trusted, right? Maybe that are you like, I'll talk with people at my seminars, right? Are you open to the idea that possibly someone could be trusted? Is there anybody in your life that is trustworthy? Well, yeah, my mom. Okay. So maybe that belief system may not be true. Well, who else is trusted in your life? Well, my brother's trustworthy. Okay. And so what happens, you start to chop those legs until that thing it can't carry that belief system anymore. And then you replace it with new evidence that people can be trusted, and you shift that sentence, that belief system, and then and then what's cool is once you start to install that new belief system, you start to find evidence of it, and you start to see that evidence, and then it eventually becomes solid where there's enough legs underneath it. That's kind of my process for redeveloping.
That's amazing. Like people don't realize. I hope they really pay attention to that and take notes, because they don't realize the nugget of gold that you just were able to lay out for them right there. You just have to be responsible and take that responsibility to say, I'm going to actually look at this because I don't like where I'm currently at. Because I can say, I always say, man, the life that you want is out there. It's just you got to take different actions. It's really that simple. If you had to say which of those pillars, the wheel of life is really where the pillars that I really work on come from. I kind of compressed a couple of them, but if you had to look at those 5 pillars, which one do you think people ask you questions about the most? Relationships? Is it business, career? Is it money or finances? Health or faith/belief? I mean, which one do you think they ask you the most about?
So we have the 4 pillars for Rise Up Kings, which is faith, family, fitness, and finances. So we've distilled them a little bit more. And inside of families, relationships. So we kind of merge those 2 together. A couple things. One is I believe the most important pillar, right? I'm a believer, so I believe the most important pillar to have accurately is faith, or on point, because you can get everything else right, a great business, great body, right, great health, good relationships, but then you miss a key component of faith, and your life could end up a mess. There's a lot of really successful people that are very lonely, and a lot of people in relationship with that are very lonely also, because they don't know how to do relationships. So I believe that's the most important one. I'd say the biggest one that people struggle with is family, is relationships. Really, they have some walls that have been built up in their life, in past circumstances and events that have created that limit intimacy. And so they therefore may have a lot of people around them, but they're not in deep relationship with them. So they don't ever experience a true vulnerability and intimacy that they're yearning for. And so there's a lot of work to do around the relationship or the family pillar.
Do you think that has, how much do you think that relates to someone's love for themselves, their own relationship, or the relationship they have for themselves? And I don't mean I love me and I'm better than everybody else, but just the forgiveness and the grace that they give themselves. I mean, do you correlate those 2 things, or is it separate from each other?
Yeah, no, they're definitely correlated. And for me, as a Christian, my love, because Christ loved me, then I can love other people. So I'm able to borrow His love that He has for me. Because the thing is, we're all selfish creatures, and so it's kind of hard to sometimes love ourselves the way we need to love ourselves, and so we have to almost borrow that. But at a certain point, maybe we can't love ourselves, but we have to learn to embrace and accept ourselves the way we are. And when we can embrace and accept ourselves, we can then accept other people the way they are, and then be able to experience love. Because love's not an emotion. People get that wrong. It's an action.
Yeah.
So love's an action, because you will not feel like loving your wife, and you still have to love your wife. So it's an action. It's an action. It's a process. And through the process of loving other people through action, you can many times generate the emotion of love. If you're really doing it out of love, not out of because I have to. That's not love. When you're choosing to take action because, hey, you know what, I love this person, I don't want to do it, but I'm choosing to because I do love them. There's power in that.
A selfless act, towards somebody without any expectation of anything in return. It's awesome. And the more, we talk about that all the time with gratitude and being grateful for things, forgiving yourself a little bit of grace, but also, just giving without any intention for receiving at all. Giving gratitude, giving time, giving energy, giving love, giving a smile, doesn't matter, just giving without the intention of any return. If you can free yourself from that feeling of wanting a return off of giving something, it's way more emotionally connecting, and you end up connecting a lot more emotionally with yourself. I think that ties back to a lot of the world that we live in and how crazy and hectic it is and how much noise there is. Do you have a meditation process or a time that during the day where you quiet the mind, or do you just try to push as much out as you possibly can and be as productive as possible?
No, I'm very in tune with my body and where my stress level's at. So I tend to operate at a very low level of stress throughout the day. And if I get stressed, I course correct very quick, right? So I will meditate, I'll pray, I'll journal, I'll exercise. Those are some of the things that I do to shift my energy to not be operating in that high level of stress. But yeah, my morning routine, I have a very strong morning routine I've had for the last probably 8 years, which is I wake up at 4 or 5, and then I go grab my coffee, sit on the sofa in the same spot every time. There's a great book, I'm sure you read it, Atomic Habits. Really good book, and it just one of the best books ever written on habits, I believe. And just the habits are everything. They really drive results also. And so I want to make everything positive that I can habitual. And so I grab my coffee, read the Bible, and then review my goals, read affirmations, and then I go exercise. And so I'll go work out for 30 minutes to an hour. And my exercise is a little bit of my meditation. That's where I can clear my mind and really kind of get my alone time.
I just want everyone that's listening to this to understand right now. I've interviewed some of the top producers, just some amazing individuals that are doing great things to change other people's lives and help them. And if you notice, there's themes, and I talk about that a lot. There's themes, and there's things that you can model that are just principles that the people that are producing in a high level are doing. And things like meditation or prayer is one of those things. Having a habit of routine, having a morning routine. And I'm not saying you have to adopt someone's morning routine, because I've tried a lot of them. I've tried Alex Hormozy's stuff and Tony Robbins stuff, and just a lot of different people that do stuff that are really off the wall for a lot of people. But what I did was I developed my own routine. I took a little bit from this person and a little bit from that person and said, what do I need to start my day off in a gratitude state? And that's really what I developed. And I really want everybody to listen to what Skylar just said and think about how you can utilize that stuff and try it for a couple weeks. And if you like certain parts of it, if it feels natural, it feels good, great. Just use it. If it doesn't, then let that part go. But it's as in the Bible, it talks about act like a child, think like a child. It's really that I'm excited to see how this will feel. Not, well, this is going to be uncomfortable, because you shut yourself off from the possibility if you get into that state of emotion. So Skylar, anything else you'd like to add? I hope everybody checks you out, first of all, on, we're going to have all the links to all of this stuff, but go into one of the events. I'm definitely going to come to one of your events for sure. Never been to one, but now after we've talked for a while, I really want to go and see what your events are all about. Really love how aligned we are and talking about these principles and everything. But anything that you'd like to leave anybody with, any grain of just nugget of information or something that they could use to take action on.
That's good. So. And this right, I'm on a decent amount of podcasts, and so this always changes. It always changes depending on where I'm at, right? What's most important at that moment. For me, I would say keep your main priorities. And so not just, it's like getting clarity on what your main priority is, right? So if you're like, we talk about those, you talk about the 5 pillars, right? We have our 4 pillars. What ones are the highest priority? Right. And so, like, for me, it's faith, family, fitness, and finances. And everybody has different reasons of why whatever order they put theirs in, but make them a priority. So it's funny. I went hunting this last weekend. I took some of my coaching clients, and we were talking about priorities, and they talked about how their business, they say their family is their top priority, yet they'll go spend 10 to 12 hours a day in their business, and then they'll give their family the leftovers. And so it's not really their priority. And then this specific guy, he made his fitness. He's doing 75 hard, and he's working out 2 to 3 times a day. But he struggles giving his wife an hour of undedicated time. But he'll spend 2 hours working out. So it's like, man, we can say our priorities are one way, but then the way we live our life, it shows they're totally a different way. And so I think just getting clear on what our priorities are and really making an effort to keep those. I compare marriage, right? And this is my perspective on marriage versus business. A lot of people say, hey, I'll spend more time with my family once I get successful in business. But I consider marriage, right? Marriage is like this glass ball and business is a rubber ball. So what happens with business is if you drop it, right, you can go bankrupt, you can rebuild. If you neglect, right, if you neglect business, if you neglect your family too long, I was with a guy this weekend. His relationship with his son is completely destroyed because he spent too much time on his business and he wasn't intentional enough with his relationship with his son. That marriage and family ball is glass. And so you neglect that a little bit too long, that thing will drop and you can get divorced. You could lose your relationship with your kids. That can go away almost immediately. Business can always be rebuilt. So it's focusing on like, hey, dedicate the time necessary for your family while you have them around.
And that is a great point. And, knowing your priorities is extremely important, knowing them. Now, here's something that I would like everyone here to do, take action from my perspective. What you just talked about was knowing your priorities. And you can use Skylar's 4, faith, finances, fitness, or
family.
Sorry about that. I had a pop up here in my thing. Anyway, faith, finance, fitness, or family. You can use those 4. You can use the 5 in our Fix Your BS side. It doesn't matter. But the point is you write them down in order of importance of put your priority of where it is. Then here's what I want everybody to do. If you have a significant other, spouse, best friend, or someone that you're close with, go ask them, hey, if you had these 5 things and you could tell me which one do you think my highest priority is, which one do you think it is? Now, you want to get some reality checks. You're going to get some reality checks. This is something my wife and I did. I said, look, if I look at these 5 things, I'm putting faith first. She's like, no, you wouldn't. I said, what would it be? And she goes, money. Plain and simple, money. I go, where do you think you rank? She goes, we're right at the bottom, right above the last one. I'm like, what? Because I'm looking at my 5 and I'm in a completely different order than what she's telling me. So, people judge you by your actions. Yeah. But you talk about an emotional, you got to be ready for that because they're going to tell you something different based on your actions, which is different than what you think your actual, what you believe your priorities are. So I did that with her. I did that with my staff, a couple staff members that I'd been around a long time and a friend of mine. And
with kids also. So,
oh yeah.
With kids, because they'll give you feedback and say, hey, and also a great question if you have kids is, hey, how am I doing as a father? And actually asking for that feedback. Where could I be better? Where am I doing good? Where could I be better? And like just the feedback, even from little ones, well, they'll give you some pretty direct feedback. Do you think I put you above? I have a 10-year-old and he'll call me out. He said, you told me we're going to do this with me, but you did it. So he calls me out on broken commitments, which is pretty powerful.
That is extremely powerful because most people want to be the person that they say they are. But your actions speak louder than your words. So Skylar, man, I think we could go on for hours. I love talking with you. We're going to definitely be hanging out in the future. Just absolutely stellar information. Like people don't realize the value that is in this podcast. I hope they rewatch it, take a bunch of notes. But the main thing is take the notes and then take action. That's the main thing because nothing happens until you take action. Really appreciate you being on. It's been a pleasure for me. I'm going to, like I said, follow up with you in the future. We're going to be doing some stuff, I'm sure, in the future too. Everybody click the link. Make sure you follow. You can follow Skylar in all sorts of different places. We got Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We got his LinkedIn. But show up to a couple of events as well. I appreciate you being on. And I look forward to people reaching out. And I hope they let you know that they came from this podcast as well, because it's my goal to spread the principles that are going to help people improve, whether I can do it or whether somebody else does it. It doesn't matter to me. I just want to give to be able to make that happen. So hopefully I've done that for you as well. All right.
Appreciate it.
No problem, man. Like I said, appreciate you being on. So until next time, everybody, this has been, Fix Your BS, where we talk about belief systems, 5 major pillars or 4 major pillars. It doesn't matter. Relationships, career, faith, health, and finance, or faith, finance, fitness, and family. Either way, it's still all important. Hopefully you took some action on these items, and let me know. Go to my Instagram. Let me know what you got out of this. As always, I want to know the results that you're getting from the things we're putting out there. I'd really appreciate that. But until next time, I'm Dr. Greg, also known as Dr. G. And this has been Fix Your BS, and we'll see you soon.